All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Excited to be with you as always. I'm even more excited because my dear friend Einar Tangen is here already. So I'm going to bring him in, guys, and we're going to start right away because we got a lot to go over. So let me bring in Einar. Hi, Einar.
Hi, David. A pleasure to be here, especially on a Sunday, because this is a time to reflect.
Well, I know I could be just sharing some cup of coffee with you here. So, but we're very excited here.
That's a great idea. Next time we both have coffee, it makes
Why not?
Yes. I had my
Very,
coffee before, but having it during would even be better.
that would be even better. I couldn't agree more. So, well,
Mm.
very excited. To those who do not know who Einar Tangen, Einar Tangen is a senior fellow at Taihe Institute. He's also the founder of the Asia Narrative in Narratives, in addition to being a senior fellow at the Center for International Business Ethics, which is at the University of International Business and Economics. Guys, I put the full bio in the description, so make sure you check it out. And as to the Taihe Institute, I have a link for you right here. Here is the thing, guys. I highly recommend you go to the Institute and look at the articles. Read those articles there. I've been reading some. Very, very informative. So, all right, Einar, we're going to have a lot to cover here. So, of course, we're going to be talking about could the Trump trade war with China spark a real war? But before that, I would like to have your take on what happened about a week or so, between Pakistan and India. In your opinion, was it this a setup by an outside entity, an outside third party to create tensions on the border of China?
Well, the timing is always suspicious, but you can say there's always something going on in the world. There certainly would be a desire to stir tensions, but not necessarily war. As you saw from the international reactions, every other country out there, instead of taking sides, said both India and Pakistan have to somehow come to terms, start talking, stop firing. Unfortunately, there are plenty of reasons to believe that on either side there could have been a motive. For Modi, maybe it was a chance to stir ultranationalism and try to unite people during a very difficult political time. And the same could be true in Pakistan. But these are speculations. We don't know. And this is, David, this is the real issue here.
Yeah.
India started acting based on what they believed, as opposed to any kind of investigation. Pakistan immediately said, look, we'll cooperate in investigation. China signed on. Russia, everybody said, look, get the facts before you start firing. India, stirred on by public opinion. Modi is a strong man. He said, no, I have to act. They mulled their responses. And the responses came back, and they were not terrific for either side. Obviously, people died, and this is the issue that people should keep foremost in their mind. But allegedly, planes, about $1 billion worth more from the Indian side, were lost in this attempt to do it. Now, I was on both Pakistan and Indian TV. Both sides were, especially on the Indian side, they were really talking this up as an opportunity to, quote, bloody the nose of Pakistan. And I kept asking, well, okay, fine. You want to bloody the nose. People will die. What will this accomplish? What is the end game? Not once did anybody address that. And I had asked 2 or 3 times on every show, what is the end game? What do you expect to happen? You're both nuclear powers. On the Pakistan side, they were condemning India because they said, oh, you're a rush to judgment. We want an investigation. This is a pretext, all these things. The short answer is that both sides have to keep talking, and they have to make sure that they're using what they have already. I mean, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is aimed deliberately at this. This is what it's supposed to do, anti-terrorism. Why aren't they looking for the answers? If a few desperate terrorists are intent on killing innocent people to stir trouble and you allow them, terrorism has won. And this is the part that I find so ironic. And I pointed that out to various people on Indian TV, and they just went, "Poopa, well, that has no meaning. We're gonna show everybody we're strong."
Well, I was just very, very surprised at one particular aspect, which has to do with, since you mentioned about the downing of the fighter jets, the Indian one. Interesting enough is that Chinese missiles were used from the Pakistan, which gave now more credibility to the Chinese weapons versus those of the West. So, and I found that very, very surprising, to say the least. But here's the thing, Einar. I am still thinking about two other aspects regarding this conflict, and please correct me if I am wrong. The two other aspects has to do with undermining two things: BRICS on one end, and the economic corridor between China and Pakistan. Will I be fair in this assessment?
Well, I don't know if it necessarily undermines BRICS. BRICS was pretty much uniform. They were telling India that you need to come to some sort of terms. The romance between Modi and Trump is not on good ground, especially since Trump has been claiming that he was the key to stopping the warfare, the shooting back and forth. This does not play well in India. And there are a number of stories and press saying, well, who is this guy claiming that he's somehow a factor here? Doesn't sit well. So in terms of BRI, I think it actually helped in the sense that, once again, the U.S. Was not a sensitive or reliable partner in this particular aspect from the Indian point of view. In terms of the military stuff, listen, once you start talking about whose military equipment is superior, I always fear that this is an open invitation to some sort of conflict. It can be the side that thinks they're losing, I've lost the edge, I need to attack first, or it can be used by others who think, well, I have the advantage, let's take it. I'm not saying that China would do that, quite the opposite. But it's out there. In terms of your second question, you said the BRI, and then was the other one was
is the Pakistan-China economic corridor.
Yeah, that obviously is a huge issue in India's mind and also in the U.S. The U.S. Isn't shy about saying, "Oh, this shouldn't be there. What's going on?" You put it through. India has always, as far as I can remember, I've been on Indian TV for over 10 years. They insist that they should be given access to this route. And I said, well, how would that work? And they said, well, the things have to be settled. Yes, but are you willing to settle them? And they said, yes, if they give us back what is ours. Well, you're at this impasse. Both sides claim that Kashmir is theirs. India made some aggressive moves to say, okay, we're taking it. We're going to rename it. We're going to have the borders. We're going to allow people from the rest of India to move there and buy land, which had been prohibited before. So this is seen as a kind of a ratcheting up of tensions. From the Indian, what I always fear is that countries sleepwalk into these situations. From India's point of view, they want to show that they're strong and they're not afraid of Pakistan and they're the big guy. And then Pakistan is like, hey, we will not be marginalized. And this is the kind of talk that leads to war. And I think if anything we should be learning right now is the futility of it. Look at Ukraine, you look at Gaza. What are these accomplishing other than the deaths of civilians?
Indeed. Well, I hope there will some cool head prevails in New Delhi and get on the right side of this issue here. So let's move on to our the one specific aspect is I wanted to get your take on. And again, because I'm going to be referring to history here, I always learn from history, Einar, because it's a good way to learn for how, for example, the trade war between the U.S. and China, which has been now, as everybody knows, been escalating for months now, which both sides imposing tariffs and so forth. Now, will this ignite a global firestorm, or can it be contained? And my question on this, Einar, has to do with what took place in 1940, back then when the United States was concerned about Imperial Japan's invasion of China. Are we seeing some similarities here?
Well, there are always similarities. You can go to World War One. You can go back to the time when colonial powers decided that they need to force opium on China so that they didn't have to pay silver for tea. Opium for tea. That's quite something, quite an idea. Anyway, there are always parallels in these things because it comes down to arrogance on one side and then the other side saying, look, we won't accept that. We've seen that over and over again. And for some reason, as a race, we ignore history. You read it. Yeah. Unfortunately, many people just choose to ignore it, and they think that they're making history when in fact they're just rhyming or repeating past history. So in terms of a firestorm, I'm less concerned at this point, and that could change, that there'll be a direct confrontation. But what the U.S. has done with these tariffs, especially taking on the penguins, I mean, this is a force, you can't see them coming. They don't need submarines. They can attack you right on your territory. And literally, they're stealth animals. But it's a little bit humorous. But attacking 180 countries simultaneously, that really begs the question of whether people are thinking things through clearly in Washington. And clearly, I would be on the side that said they're not. But when you do that, the dependability of the U.S. goes away. The U.S. is seen as an aggressive bullying power, and people don't know what the future is. And this inability to predict the future affects how people regard their personal finances and how businesses see it. Unpredictability is death to business. If something comes down and somebody puts in a policy, I can accept it and I can plan around it. But when that policy is like a light switch and it goes on and off and on and off, I have no idea what the future holds, and I'm not going to do anything. And I've surveyed people on every single continent, and I said, "How do you feel about this?" And they said, "Look, what am I supposed to do? I'm trying to make money. I can't make money if I don't see the future. So I'm not going to invest in anything. I'm not going to start anything." There are a few companies that are saying, "Look, as long as I can get everything back in the next 3.5 years under Trump, maybe I'll take a stab at it. I need to get not only everything I invested, but all my profits out, because after that, it's likely that a new president will come in and say, hey, this isn't working. This guy was kicked out. I'm going to, there's a new sheriff in town, and I'm going to change policies." So this constant change is what's killing it. So what is the knock-on effect? When you have an economic downturn, which is the world is experiencing now, you put more pressure. Civil unrest becomes a bigger issue. And the Pakistan-India thing is a perfect example of that. It might be very, very seductive by certain powers by political powers, especially the ones in power, to use this kind of wag the dog approach of we'll start a little confrontation, unite the people, and that way we don't have to explain the fact that we're powerless in the face of a global meltdown. Not meltdown, but global downturn. It could be a meltdown. So this is the real danger. Civil unrest rises when economic times get hard, and you have this, going back to the nationalist card, which can be extremely dangerous.
Well, we're already starting to see some of that here in the US, by the way, Einar. I know it's not been reported widely. I had a talk with someone in LA, and there were some demonstrations against Trump's policies because people start to feel the pinch of what he's doing. And that's exactly what we're going to go into depth right now. Let's take a listen to what Bassett said, the Secretary of Treasury, and I'll take your insights about it.
Reached an agreement on a 90-day pause and substantially moved down the tariff levels. Both sides on the reciprocal tariffs will move their tariffs down 115%. We had very robust discussions. Both sides showed a great respect.
Okay, there are some background noise on this one here. So, but anyway, we wanted to just to highlight exactly what Bassett was saying. Now, here is where I have a problem. Is this very significant? This Trump's decision now, because he's stating, and that's one thing I do not like about the guy, because he's being dishonest, stating that we have reached a deal with the Chinese. There is no deal. This is just a pause for 90 days. How significant is this to begin with?
Okay, so to put it simply, Trump bluffed. His bluff was called, and now he's scrambling to change the narrative. I mean, running off to the Middle East and getting claiming that he's making trillions of dollars on deals while his family enriches itself. This distracts attention. But the fact is, when the shelves are empty at the supermarket, when the prices are going up, when people are being unemployed, that's not going to divert their attention. This is not bread and circus. If he thinks he can go back to the Roman days when you can just distract the public and keep them on edge with a few games and a kind of little dances and things like that, he's absolutely wrong. The fact is that the world needs a stable architecture, and he's not providing it. Dishonest? Well, David, let's not go down that road, because I don't think honesty and Donald Trump doesn't really go. I mean, the key is, as you know, Donald Trump never tells one lie. And I mean that. And I would ask anybody who questions that, go back to any speech he makes, and you'll find that he tells multiple lies, and lies on top of lies based on other lies. Yeah. And this is very important. I used to run political campaigns. I know exactly what it is. You divert people. If I tell you 20 lies in the space of 3 minutes, you can't keep up, especially when I start tweeting them out later and throwing on new lies. And then tomorrow I utter another 20 lies. How can the press track all that stuff? I'm interested to see if perhaps AI would be able to say, oh yeah, false, completely untrue, blah, blah, blah. That would be quite something. But as individuals, as the press itself, they can't keep track of all these things. So, expecting honesty from somebody who's dishonest is not being honest. So let us just say, Donald Trump, we expect him to divert attention, to just lie about anything that he has to, and his people, this Besant, I still don't understand. David, do you ever question why it is that Soros's #1 lieutenant is running the Treasury? Yeah. A guy who, when he struck out on his own the second time around, he had a massive failure. The first time, Daddy Soros bought him out. Mm-hmm. The second time, they just kind of moved him back because he had lost so much money. So he's never been on his own. And I think, you look at him from what I hear, he's one of these people who, kind of coddles the boss. He likes strong men. He can say, yes, I agree with you. But these are the last people on earth that you want around him. I'm not saying he doesn't understand things, but obviously the United States runs on credit. We borrowed $2 trillion off just for our budget last year. It's going to be worse this year. The debt pile grows. We don't have a single idea of how we're going to deuce it. Yeah. And in the top of that, there's this $4 trillion tax cut, which is, unfunded. So you have this thing where somebody who, in theory, should know better. He's been in the finance thing. I always thought it's funny. He was railing against financialization. Well, he made 500 million plus doing exactly that. That's what Soros does. It's like me being being a thief and then complaining that people are thieves. I'm shocked. So anyway, you have layers of dishonesty among these people, and it's not new. You can go back to any kind of court culture of the past, and you have all these sycophants who are anxious for power, no idea what they want to do with it, following somebody who who's completely nuts. And this is the situation that repeats. And going back to your earlier point, these are the types of things where you start to have real problems because countries start reacting. Economics go down. People feel the heat. People then turn to the nationalism button. And this is all heading in the wrong direction. We need better leadership. China, all right, through its Belt and Road initiatives, through, they had this recent CELAC, China CELAC meeting. These are more hopeful. This is like, I'm not trying to extract and bully you. It says, here's a plan. Here's $9 billion in credit. And it's not buying South America.
No.
All right. China initially in 2015, when this started, this is a 10-year-old project. They said, look, we've put out $15 billion that we're targeting here. China's actually reduced it, not because of the times, but because of the need. All right. They don't want to be perceived as trying to walk in and buy a country like the U.S. We just walk in and take it. I'm sure Panama is thinking about that statement right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have very, very sharp contrasts, between an administration under Donald Trump, which is a return to the jungle. I'm going to take stuff that I want. I'm going to make trade impossible for my enemies, declaring everybody an enemy, versus China, who says, look, we have to cooperate. There's got to be some sort of framework. And I think it's clear that the momentum has shifted away from the U.S. Towards anything else, even with the countries that say, look, we have to be neutral. We have to be non-aligned. The fact is, non-alignment is an enemy of Washington. They don't want non-alignment. You're either with us or against us. So by saying that you're non-aligned, you are on the enemies list. And this is going to become increasingly clear. China doesn't care. If you say you're non-aligned, fine, let's trade. We're not asking you to align with us on our priorities. We're saying, look, how can we do better together without strings? So I do think that, Trump's actions, ironically, are showing off the best sides of China.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the issues for why I had a hard time when I heard his speech saying, where we are claiming victory over China's trade talks. And I was like, how can a sitting president lie to the people's faces, basically? I mean, to me, as an American, I felt insulted. Einar. I mean, literally, I kid you not. I felt insulted because...
Yeah, but you've been insulted for how many years? I mean, saying that American politicians lie is saying, I've known many of these guys. I participated, as I said, in elections. They do it. Lying is, kind of permissible a sport, but Donald Trump has taken it to a new level. And you should be outraged when your leaders lie to your face to say, the sun isn't shining, that's the moon. Well, no, it's the middle of the day. The sun is shining. No. Don't believe that. That's propaganda. Let me assure you, the moon is out in full. It just looks like the sun. I mean, these are the kind of nonsensical things that, people have turned to. So in terms of Donald Trump, expecting him to suddenly be honest would be a little bit, naive. I mean, he's not going to. The lies are going to get worse. They're going to become more and more blatant, as we have seen. I mean, here's a man who's going to the Middle East to enrich his family. All these big promises that are being made by all these countries, guess what? Take a look at the time scale. Time scale, it means that they will actually only be in danger of being realized after Trump is gone. So countries and corporations are doing exactly the same. They throw out huge numbers with no intention of following through. It's just, it's easier to say yes and, give the baby a piece of candy to shut it up. But is it real? No, it's not a real meal. The American people aren't going to profit from this. This is just gimmickry, exactly like Besant's statement. They have to, you know, the one thing you know about Trump is no matter how badly he fails, he'll claim victory. I mean, no matter how poorly, remember all his statements, kiss my, and, I'll never go back, and, sending his people to the Hill and saying, defend my policies. And when they do so, they're notified by the congressman who says, hey, your guy just, turned the switch off for 90 days. And they're like, I can't discuss that. Well, you're there to discuss it. I mean, it's complete chaos. And that's how he wants to govern. He has to keep people attention away from the reality and on all the little gimmicks he throws out there. As I call them, white rabbits. You release a white rabbit, everyone, their eyes follow it. And that's what he does on a daily basis.
And this one also is reflecting on the failure of the system. I mean, I'm starting to see, I read an article from overseas regarding the concept of the meritocracy, which is in China's systems, and makes you just wonder, this failure of Donald Trump, is it also a reflection of the failure of the system? That doesn't happen just with Trump. It's been going on, at least since I was in Washington, D.C. I start to notice.
Yeah, I mean, when your system is failing, you double down on the failures. I mean, here's, Donald Trump has said the system is rotten. It's dominated by ideologues who are pushing an agenda that's anti-American. Well, what's his solution? He's going to make basically the majority of not the majority, all of the top staff of the government, including the bureaucracies, which used to be untouchable. He's going to make them into political appointees. Well, okay. I asked Republicans all the time. I said, aren't you afraid that if a Democrat gets in, that they're going to get rid of all your guys and then put in their political appointees, and all you're going to get is a paralysis of government that tells you what you want to hear as opposed to what the reality is and how you're supposed to act? And they say, well, that's for the future. Right now, we got to get our hands on the power. We got to change things. We got to show the American people that, we can really deliver. I said, you're kidding me. Wow. You're really saying that you're going to ruin the system and that somehow it's all going to work out, that you can convince the American people. I mean, going back to your earlier point, for years I'd read the literature and they say, well, we went from 1971, 61% of the American population was middle class. And for years it had been stuck. Lately, for the last 5 years, I've been hearing this number 50. It's gone down to 50%. And within the last couple of months, I said, this doesn't sound right. All right, I'm going to do some research. So I continue to do research. And what I found is that if in 2024, they did a study based on median income and they compared it to 1971. And guess what? Only 40% of Americans are now middle class. So you've seen a 1/3 drop. This would explain the anger, right? The confusion, the desire to have somebody strong come and tell them, don't worry, it'll be okay. All right. I mean, the system has failed its people. America was able to do things beyond the view of the people involved. People said, look, I have kids, I have grandchildren, I want a better world for them. And I'm willing to vote that way, even if it costs me a few tax dollars or doing something I don't necessarily, completely have 100% agreement on. We need to move the nation forward. And there was that willingness. But when you get down to 40%, I'm sorry, you've lost it. Right? People are just saying, I'm barely hanging on. You look at the credit card defaults, student loan defaults, mortgages being taken back, car loans that have gone into default. They're all heading towards historic levels. And what is Donald Trump doing? He's taking a victory lap and enriching his family. But this is going to catch up with him. He can say what he wants, but the reality, as I said, when people go to the store and the shelves are empty and the prices are higher, they're not going to be so interested in how much Donald Trump's kids are making through these multi-billion-dollar deals. When Vietnam is giving him a $1.2 billion golf course, he's getting a $400 million plane from Qatar. I mean, the list goes on. Why? It's easier to bribe him than it is to deal with his kind of nonsensical economic policies. But this will cost the American public. and you'll continue to see a decline in those who are considered middle class.
Well, it is starting already, as I mentioned earlier. It is not reported here. I don't know why the media is not covering the demonstrations that's taking place in LA and some other places also, with the signs about Trump, and just system is a mess. So let me move to, I want to get your take into, within the context of this trade war between the US and China, of course. There is one thing I want to get your take on, Einar, and this one has to do with the China trade with ASEAN. Now, China is ASEAN's largest trading partner, if I'm not mistaken, because the trade between the two, at least based on what I read, has grown significantly from about 10-15 years ago. So right now they are about 1.7, the last stat that I looked at, 1.7 trillion yuan. How this is now going to move forward, given the tensions that exist with the United States? Will China say, you know what, let the American do whatever, we are moving into this direction where the economic prosperity with ASEAN, with the RCEP and other economic blocs?
Oh, you're absolutely right, David. I mean, this is a situation where 8 years ago, China started preparing for the future. They realized there had been a shift. They had been caught flat-footed. They literally were really surprised. It just, they thought, oh, well, all American politicians use the anti-China card. But they said, well, he's a business guy. He understands basic business, and, America needs China's markets and also production. So they thought it would be okay. And I said, it didn't work out that way. But since that time, they have been preparing. And that's what you are seeing today. Rather than, being uncertain, there was a lot of delays in how they reacted to Donald Trump first-term policies. This time around, it's within a few days. It's coordinated. It's very targeted. They know exactly what their game plan is. But I mean, as part of that, for the last 10 years, you said, oh, ASEAN and things, 10 years. What else is 10 years? Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative is an idea. It's the idea that, look, if we don't have the infrastructure, I certainly can't get the resources out of your country. And if we can, get those resources, but also add value to them, your people are going to have jobs. They're going to have disposable income, and they're going to start buying things. And we hope to, that they'll consider Chinese products based on the quality and the price and good trade relations. So China has been carefully preparing for the future. They knew that the U.S. was unreliable, and they were uncertain about what would happen with Europe. So they have just said, look, the rest of the world is bigger in terms of markets, population, land, GDP, you name it. This idea when the U.S. had 50% of the GDP of the world, then you had to basically knuckle under. There's really not much you can do. They controlled so many things. Of course, they didn't complain about their own economic, political, and military hegemony. That only comes later when we're not that. Well, that's not right. Anyways, so you have the situation now is you can go forward. The U.S. continues to decline, but there is a certain amount of masking. People have to understand what has happened. How is it that ASEAN has risen so quickly, not only in its trade with China, but also its trade with Europe and America? And then the simple fact is that a lot of the trade that was going on directly with China has now, in essence, transferred to ASEAN. There are a lot of intermediate goods. For instance, if clothes or sneakers, right? Well, the clothes are let's say they're made in Vietnam or Bangladesh. Doesn't matter. The thread, the cloth, the buttons, even the little tag at the back, all made in China. So they're importing those. So that adds to China's trade GDP. And then they're exporting it. And in the process, they're earning money. So it's kind of a virtuous cycle. China is benefiting, they're benefiting. And the US and other markets are benefiting because they're getting less expensive products. Remember, this is one of the few ways in which the middle class has been winning. The fact that costs for so many things, especially necessities, furniture, clothing, shoes, things like that, pencils, assemble a let's send my kid back to school list of things they need, the backpack, everything. 99% is made in China. Yeah, so there has been a part of it. Now the U.S. is trying to figure out how it can break that cycle, but they don't have a means to do it. And quite frankly, they're not going to start manufacturing pencils in the United States, nor are they going to start putting together clothes. I mean, right now, do you understand that the American Manufacturers Association has come out and says, we cannot find, all right, people who can work in our factories. And you're talking about reindustrializing America. Where are the people who can work in our factories? And we're not talking about nuclear scientists here, right? We're talking about people who can read, write, perhaps understand a little bit about a blueprint, understand how to turn on a computer on and off, the instructions, do things, repair machinery. Where are these people? How is it possible that you want to change America, but you don't have the means to do it? It's like saying, I want to fly to the moon, but all I lack is a vehicle. It's just absurd. So, they're pushing perception as opposed to reality.
All right. Liking this video so far? Don't just be a watcher. Go ahead and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And don't forget to tap the bell so you will not miss any of my videos or live streams. This way, you will be supporting a channel that stands for the truth and objective reporting. The choice is yours. Thanks for your support. Now, when we think about ASEAN, I'm also thinking in other direction, especially from a geopolitical perspective. Will I be wrong? And again, I read some analysis, white paper regarding this. Will I be wrong, Einar, if I am to say that China's trade with RCEP, not ASEAN, RCEP is a geopolitical win for China?
Well, I would phrase it slightly different. It's a geopolitical win for the people who are involved in it. This is simply globalization. This is globalization taken to a regional level. I mean, given that the U.S. has, hobbled the WTO, the only thing that you can do as a region is start banding together. Say, look, we're not going to. The U.S. isn't willing to cooperate. TPP, remember that? Trans-Pacific Partnership. Yeah, that didn't work out. Now, did it? U.S. Donald Trump walked away. And this was something where the U.S. was the heavy hand. They were trying to force all of these very nasty little ideas that you couldn't attack poor tobacco companies, and that pharma was off limits, and that our technology rules and you can't do anything about it, and we get to sue you individually as countries if you even try to take on American interests. Well, they left. All those provisions were thrown out. TPP is kind of under the wire, but it is going along. But what was that? That was regionalization, and the U.S. opted out of it. RCEP is exactly the same thing. The world, as you were alluding to in your earlier question, the world is moving on from the U.S., and the U.S. doesn't realize it. It still thinks that it's at the center of the universe and that nothing can happen. And you've heard Donald Trump express that position. Fact is, the world is moving on. I mean, Rome fell. Every empire falls based on their arrogance. And right now, the U.S. is at peak arrogance.
Yeah. Will I be right if I say, Einar, will I be wrong? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Will I be right if I am to say that the global system can move on without the United States?
No, you're absolutely correct. Will it be painful? Absolutely. It'll be like having a deep wound in your arm and then ripping off the plaster. But what countries are considering now is, how do we deal with the U.S., which is so aggressive? That is not only an economic threat, but also a military one. How secure do countries feel when they hear about Canada being 51st state, Greenland being taken, Gaza being taken. Oh, you know, Gaza?
Yeah.
You're going to take over Gaza, and then the Panama Canal. All right. This is not a roadmap where countries say, "Oh, we want to be aligned with you. You represent freedom. You represent international order. You represent, you know, the rule of law." No, they don't. And Trump is, you know, put no pretenses on. I don't care. I'm going to take what I want. I'll do what I want, or what you allow me to do. So yes, the rest of the world is moving on. Is it painful? Yes. But in terms of the future, it's more beneficial to get rid of the US than it is to keep it. Because, you know, this threat about, oh, well, you know, our demand will go down. Sure, your demand will go down. But, you know, guess what? If you want clothes, you're going to have to buy them from somewhere else. You're not going to make them in the United States. All right. If you want furniture, you want kids supplies, you want sneakers, you want, you know, people don't realize there's daily supplements, you know, vitamin A, D, zinc, all that. Guess where it's made? Chemicals for health, you know, for medicines.
Yeah.
The bulk chemicals are made in China. You want to move on from that? Good luck. You know, you need rare earths. China's doesn't have a lock on rare earths. Rare earths are all over the world, and they're in many areas where they're in concentration. You know what China has? They have the cheapest and best and the highest purity processing. That's why China dominates. They keep saying that it's like China has all the rare earths. This is nonsense. What they have is the technology developed over years that has put their processing at 10 to 15 years ahead of anything else that is available. Because when you're dealing with these rare earths, a lot of it has to do with the purity.
Yeah.
All right. You have to have 99.9997% purity in order for this thing to work properly. And if you don't, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. So that's why China is there. It's a technological edge. And these are the types of things that people are ignoring in their haste to say, well, we'll make ourselves great by breaking the legs of our competition. It's just silly.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Speaking of rare earth, by the way, guys, I did an analysis about it. It's going to be released on Monday or Tuesday. I'm not certain yet. But it's exactly what Einar mentioned about the rare earth and how China has the technological know-how. This is one of the reasons. By the way, Einar, I read the statement by the Strategic Command in the Pentagon regarding the concerns about access to rare earth, especially from China because of the technology aspects of it. So now, while I'm thinking about it, I read also that Donald Trump is going to speak to President Xi Jinping. Should Xi Jinping answer the phone, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no harm in a phone call. What is the concern? Because the phone call is private. They're not going to sit there on speakerphone and things like this. Yeah. But there is a concern on the Chinese side that given what Trump has done to other world leaders, that he would deliberately try to, be disrespectful to Xi. He's just too unknown. So until Xi is comfortable, this clown isn't going to do something to humiliate China, which would it's not about Xi Jinping being humiliated. It's the fact that, 1.4 billion people are not very happy with the US. And if their leader in their government is being humiliated, this would ratchet up tensions. You don't need to do that. So this is really just preventative medicine. Talking, there's nothing wrong with it. The issue is, what are you going to talk about? Donald Trump wants to sell his stuff that, you got to knuckle under, you got to give me some room here, all this kind of stuff. It's just like talking to a used car salesman. And unfortunately, we have another 3.5 years of this used car salesman. I shouldn't say used car salesman. There's nothing wrong with being a used car salesman. We should say a con man. There's not, you have to deal with this guy. He's a 6-time bankrupt who's working on his 7th bankrupt that'll eclipse all the other ones in terms of taking the American nation into bankruptcy. So what do? Well, you have to be the adult in the room and try to manage him. So, I would say to you, expect a phase 2. And people say, well, why do you say that? Well, they had this 6-point white paper where they mentioned phase 1. Why would you mention phase 1? Then they did some unilateral tariff reductions on chemicals and also on computer parts. It's quite clear. And why look at the mechanism, David. The reason the phase two is a very, looked on very favorably by Beijing is that it's an ongoing deal, right? It's not, I give you some money and then hopefully you agree to follow through. No. This is day by day. The moment you go back on your word, all right, or the agreement, that phase two is dead. And you have to calculate that into whatever it is kind of nonsense you want to propose. So this is one way of tying Donald Trump to the deal. And I think this is clearly where things are headed. It also allows Donald Trump to declare victory, saying, "Oh, this was my goal all along." And he's going to say that, David, no matter what happens. That was my plan. I was playing 16-dimensional chess. People just thought I was an idiot. Anyway, so this is a way of kind of, how do you deal with a guy like this? It's going to be 3.5 years. You try to tie him to specific things, understand his mentality. If he wants to enrich his children, I guess there'll be companies that are willing to do that. I just wonder at some point, will the American public, realizing that they're facing empty shelves while his children are enriching themselves, whether that actually comports with their idea of the the president they elected.
Well, actually, what you stated, Einar, is that it was a report came out about 3 days ago or so that the GDP in the U.S. fell at an annual rate of 0.3% or 30 basis points, and this is just from the Q4 of 2024. So, and this decline is undeniably caused by the tariffs, by the sort of the erratic policies of Donald Trump. That is
no, it's all Biden.
Oh, I was wrong, right?
He literally. I mean, this is unbelievable to me. He comes out and says, "No, all the bad parts, Biden. All the good parts,
me."
And, you kind of sit there. I feel like there's an 11-year-old sitting in the president's chair saying, "No, I'm good. They're bad. Who's them? Anybody who isn't me."
It's very embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. I don't think so.
But I mean, why isn't it's embarrassing. You see it, but why isn't the majority of his base seeing it? I think eventually they will.
Well, this started, Einar. There is a conversation
there's
now
a drop,
among the MAGA people. MAGA people now are start to question this kind of the decision of these policies, because they are not reflecting on the welfare of the American citizens, like what you mentioned earlier. Straightforward, and they are going into that direction.
Well, we're going to the full impact of the ongoing 30% tariffs are going to be felt in a couple of months when spare parts and everything that's been warehoused is gone, and they're having to pay the true price of Donald Trump's tariffs. And when that happens, I could see as much as a third of his base melting away. And what I'm concerned about, and people understand, the line between love and hate, all right? When your prophet turns out to be a false prophet, it is not something where you say, "Well, I screwed up. I shouldn't believe everyone I talk to." It turns to hatred. They say, "This guy betrayed me. He betrayed us." And I'm very concerned about that. These are very adamant people, and they've been betrayed, or they feel they've been betrayed, and I think they're right, by the American political process, which has done nothing while the country has declined. I'm concerned that they become radicalized, that they become the ones who want to shoot Trump on things, and this is not good for America to have another open front of radicalism going on. So there's real concerns about what happens to his base, and how they turn on each other, and if it gets violent, and these types of things. Because disappointment, especially when you've poured 8 years of your support into a charlatan, to suddenly have him revealed, that can be quite traumatic for people.
By the way, Einar, you mentioned the 30% for the tariff. I'm thinking it's 50 because I am counting the 20% from the first term. Would that be right?
Well, yes and no. Okay, so it's not 20 across the board. There were different areas where it was hit.
Okay.
If you want to add in steel, then it goes up even higher. I mean, there's such a hodgepodge trying to figure out what the tariffs are on any given day.
Right.
Yes, no wonder businessmen don't want to invest. I mean, we don't know what's happening day to day. You can't calculate it.
Yeah.
I can say, well, it's on certain goods, not on other goods. I mean, this has to be really difficult for anybody who's trying to make a business decision, right?
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's an impossible. Uncertainty, as I've said, is the enemy of business.
I'm gonna need to talk to you about a Latin American country, but before I do this, I want to get your take, Einar, for the community to know about China's recent decision to appoint Li Chengkang. You know who this guy is, right?
I know the name. To appoint him to what?
They appointed him now to who's gonna be taking part into the negotiations regarding.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and I believe because he has quite. I read up about his background. Yeah, he had quite an extensive experience in handling international negotiations because he used to do that at MOFCOM, and he also served as China's ambassador to Geneva-based World Trade Organization. What is the angle here for China, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, China is. I mean, look, they forced Donald Trump to take a meeting with his people. Or his people to take a meeting outside the U.S. If you look prior to this point, you either had to get on your knees at Mar-a-Lago or you had to come hat in hand to Washington. Uniformly, there were no meetings outside the U.S. And this was what Donald Trump's way of, psychologically saying, "I'm the king, and you're nothing. You come and beg." Now, the fact that, China said, no, that isn't happening. So, he's still waiting for that phone call. I still remember there's this wonderful picture of it's not real, of course, it's CGI, but anyways, it shows Xi Jinping laughing, holding a book of The Art of the Deal, and then Donald Trump waiting by a phone, steaming. When's he going to call? I mean, it's childish. I mean, it's really a shame, but that's it. But so why did China choose Geneva? Because that's adding salt to America's wounds. Because Geneva is where the WTO is centered. And after the meeting, what did they do? He made a report directly to the head of the WTO, who said, "Good job, guys." I mean, this is the U.S. has prevented the WTO from functioning properly by refusing to allow appellate judges. You need a three-person appellate panel in order to hear an appeal. If any country appeals an initial verdict, it isn't final until the appeal has been settled. That's the process. And the U.S. has said, well, we don't like that. We don't recognize any power greater than our own. We will just simply not allow appellate judges. And it wasn't because they were losing. U.S. was willing overwhelmingly, 70% of the cases against it, 90% of the cases where they were bringing them. So, but because it wasn't 100% on both sides, they said, no, this isn't working for us. So they have had a full frontal attack on the WTO, and China is trying to say, look, we need to return to sanity here. We need an international body that regulates trade. This is an existing one. Reinventing the wheel, difficult. If they're not able to do WTO, the fallback position, as you correctly put, RCEP, TPP, regional efforts, the BRRI, regional efforts to do, in essence, the same thing. But as I said, building something is harder than using an existing vehicle, and the WTO is the preferred version. So in terms of China's, the fact that they have somebody who's an expert on WTO, has had somebody who believes in it, who's been there, this is a real sign to the U.S. that you are on, the world, as you put it earlier, the world can move on without you. It will be painful, really painful for so many. But if the prospect is of dealing with even more pain and uncertainty because you're involved in the process, you really don't have a choice. And I don't think the subtleties of what the Chinese put forward are often understood in DC. I talk to these people. I said, well, what do you think they're trying to say? Oh, I don't know. They're just playing some stupid game. We're going to force things through. We have guardrails. We're going to make the Chinese understand. You can't. We talk. You listen. So this is the irony. The U.S. wants to talk. They want everyone to listen, but the U.S. is not listening. Not at all. Completely deaf, dumb, and blind in terms of the realities of a multipolar world that is making a decision as we speak as to whether or not the U.S. will be a welcome divider. It's not going to stop trade, but you're not going to be part of the international framework.
I always felt, Einar, that the U.S. wants to maintain the unipolar system, but it does not want to be part of it. He wants the unipolar, but he doesn't want to be part of it because they can control it.
I just want the benefits, not the responsibilities. I'm not going to make the cookies. I just want to eat them. As I said, does this sound like an 11-year-old? Mom, can you make cookies? I want to eat them. Are you going to help? No. I just want to eat the cookies. I like the sweet stuff. I don't like the work.
You're absolutely correct, Einar. So let's move on to our last segment of this conversation. Guys, this is why I always like having Einar here. So you guys got to learn something, and you got to listen to Einar's.
I don't know about that,
humor.
Humor.
They do, Einar. They don't like you.
No. The one thing that I always complain about is that he says, I've never learned anything while I was talking. Listening, yes. So for me, these are dead spots. I actually, that's why I love listening to your show and your ideas. I learn so much. You can't tell other people to listen if you're not listening yourself. Only the wise man listens, the fool expounds, right?
Couldn't agree more.
But sometimes I feel like, well, wait a second. You say that, but you're always on TV saying these things. What does that mean? It means I have to be more and more careful. I have to do more and more listening outside the times that I'm doing things like this, and it's really an honor. But I hope if I can get people to think, it's not that you have to agree with me. I just want you to think about these things in your own terms. It's not about groupthink. It's really about individual assessment, looking at the values of what's going on.
Yeah, and this is one of the important things about listening to a different perspective. We don't have to think alike, but we still have to have the ability to listen to a different perspective. So that, to me, that's what learning is all about. So let's talk about. I'd like to really get your take onto what just happened between Colombia and China regarding the BRI, because now Colombia signed on into the BRI. But the way I want to ask you about this one, not just from an economic perspective, even though you mentioned at the beginning, this is where people or countries have to think in terms of infrastructure and so forth. What I want to ask you, Einar, is what will this move by Colombia signify when it comes down to the geopolitical landscape in Latin America, given that the United States has always viewed Latin America as its own backyard?
Well, you have to add on to that the very contentious but close relationship between Colombia and the United States. Colombia was producing cocaine, not so much anymore. It's moved into other areas, other countries. But remember, it was U.S. demand for drugs, right? And poor Latin American countries who responded to it. It could, when the U.S. wanted hashish, they and opium and things like that, they get it from Afghanistan. Is that Afghanistan's fault? Well, they're poor, we're rich, we're willing to pay lots of money for drugs. It sounds to me like that is an American problem. No one is forcing them. It's not like the opium wars where the U.S. forced, and Great Britain forced themselves on as the drug dealers of choice. Right? This is simply the American people. Now, underlying all of this is this issue about why is it that the supposedly richest, most successful, powerful country on earth, so many of its people are in jail, and so many more are taking drugs and killing themselves in record numbers. And, I never understand when people rail, war on drugs. I said the war will never be over as long as the demand is there. You think you can cut off demand, you're crazy. Yeah. Also, Colombia has had, their share of contentious internal issues, some fueled by drugs, other by ideology. U.S. has been there. They have a big military presence. So for Colombia to openly join the BRRI at a time when the U.S. has pressured successfully, Panama to leave it, is a real, it's not a good thing for Washington. They just had to put up a loss in the columns. This is not what they wanted. They always said Colombia depends on us, their anti-narco stuff and their anti-insurgency stuff, that all comes from us. We own them. And this attitude of we own you because you use our stuff really grates, especially on South Americans. I mean, the renewed talk about having a new Monroe Doctrine, reinstating it, the one that was finally gotten rid of, the idea that America can control South America simply because it is nearby. In essence, like Greenland, you're an unacknowledged 53rd territory, not state, because you don't have to vote. We just tell you what to do, and we extract your resources, and when necessary, we kill your leaders, even if they're democratically elected. Years of this have made South Americans very wary of the U.S. It's not that they hate America people or as a country, but they dislike, and for good reason, the policies of things. But let me get to an underlying part. Whether they joined or not, I've known the Colombian ambassadors here in China for quite a few of them. I can tell you, BRI is an idea. Whether you're part of it or not, you either embrace the idea that I'm going to develop my country based on infrastructure and connectivity and to trade with those who are willing to trade with me. That's an idea. That's not, you can't kill it. You can say, withdraw. Okay. How is that going to change Panama short of the U.S. taking it over? They'll continue to trade with China. China is a huge user of the ports, I should say. So this is the U.S. trying to use its power to, in essence, it's trying to use physical power to cancel out ideas, intellectual ideas, hopes and aspirations. So it's not going to work. But Colombia was a country that was always seen as one of ours. They can't move without our say-so. We have people there, and I don't mean nice people. We have companies there, but we have some other people from the CIA and Defense Department, et cetera. And these people will do what is necessary, as they have in the past, for American interests. And that is frightening to a lot of people. So they've taken a big risk here, but obviously they've weighed it, and they've decided, like in our previous parts of our discussion, the question right now is, how closely is the United States integrated into the global trade system? If at some point the rest of the world says, we can't deal with you. When you grow up, we'll let you out of the corner, or you come out of your corner. And when you're willing to play nice with everybody else, all right, we'll accept you back. It's not a ban for life. But until the U.S., I mean, it's, if you have an unruly 11-year-old and he's sitting at the table causing noise and things like that, the way is you say you have to go away. And when you're ready to be, to be polite, you can come back to the table and you can engage with people, but not while you're throwing tantrums and insisting you're the king of the world and everyone has to do what you say. I mean, literally, it's 11-year-old thinking.
Well, you're absolutely correct, because I am concerned as to where things are going to move forward in Latin America. I've been in Bolivia, so I kind of very familiar a little bit with that part of the world. So, but again, I am looking at the changes that's taking place on the ground. For example, with the port in Peru, the Chanquet, and how that's going to now facilitate the transport between Shanghai and Peru, but also is going to benefit Brazil and it's going to benefit Colombia. So to me, infrastructure is where, if you want your country to move forward, you develop and you build your infrastructure. It's not about military. It's not about other approach to it. But for us, the concern is always, because we already sent in now fighter jets to Panama. We already have military presence in Panama now. Because we threatened the Panamanian government that, first of all, our ships is going to cross the canal without paying. Who gives us the right to dictate the terms to others? I mean, we're going to do the same for the Suez Canal, which is not right. And that's, again, that's where my concern. I see the opportunities for Colombia, but I also see the challenges that lies ahead, because we have a dark history in Latin America, and I documented this in some of my writings. So that's where I see it moving forward.
No, I completely agree with you, but it goes back to the to our discussion earlier.
Yeah.
Has the U.S. basically isolated itself? This idea, I don't pay you for anything. I do what I want. I take these different lands because I want them, or I say I want them. I'm an empire. I will expand to figure out how to solve my internal problems. Those days are in essence over, and the global community, especially, China's role in this is that they're willing to stand up. They're the only country who is willing and could. And they have not at any point blamed any other country, except to the extent that, the U.S. is saying, you have to be our ally against China. You have to stop doing trade with them. We're going to run your trade policy from Washington. And China said, no, don't do that. We will respond. We're not going to take this lying down. Don't balkanize yourself. Don't make this into a World War I issue where you're on my side or not side. Be on your own side. We're not asking you to do anything other than be open to trade with us. If you don't want to trade with us, fine. But don't become part of some global alliance against us. Obviously, we have to push back against that. But really, despite everything that we're talking about, what is on the front burner is whether or not the United States is going to remain part of the global system or be sent to the corner until it can reform itself and, start acting more politely.
Before I give you a last word, Einar, I still have one question for you. Guys, by the way, here is, if I'm going to share with you on the screen here. If you want to follow Einar, I follow him on all this, except for Facebook. I don't do Facebook, Einar. But I on the LinkedIn and on Twitter, guys, if you want to, Einar sometimes puts some articles on LinkedIn. Very, very interesting. As to the Taihe Institute, once again, I highly recommend you guys subscribe to that. You read those articles. This is, to me, if you want to broaden your intellectual horizon and understand a different perspective about the issues. So I recommend it for you. So, all right, Einar, I have one question for you, and I'm speaking to you as an American. If I am to say I'm sitting on this side and I want to hear a word from you, what should I expect? How should I move forward?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think there's not much anyone can do for the next 3.5 years. There'll be an inflection point in a year and a half when they start going into the midterms. I would expect that Donald Trump to be heavily punished during that period. But the idea of impeaching him, be very careful about that. J.D. Vance is in many ways even more scary than Donald Trump. He's very, very closely allied with the new military industrial complex, which is on the technology side, the tech bros. Palantir, which is, owned by his sponsor, or partially owned by his sponsor, Peter Thiel, has bankrolled all of his election things. Now, this is a guy who openly scorned and said the most dreadful things about Donald Trump, and I agreed with them, all right? But now he's gone 180 degrees and he's endorsed this MAGA. speaks to me of somebody who has tremendous political ambitions, but it's not clear where it's going to go. His insistence that white South Africans are being genocidally, prosecuted while supporting the activities in Gaza by Israel in Gaza speaks to a really, really, really troubling idea. So right now we're stuck with Donald Trump, hopefully for 3.5 years, but you just have to deal with that reality. And I think you have to look outside of the United States and hope that the rest of the world tries to make it clear to Washington that you either, comport yourself like a decent country, or we're not going to deal with you. And that's the terrible thing. Yes, the protests are fine. People have to vent their anger, but it can't stop at just saying this is a bad guy. Everyone knows he's a bad guy. Even the people who voted for him said, well, he's not what kind of guy I want, but I don't have faith in Kamala Harris to take care of the economy. I think a lot of people are like, "Whoa, how much worse could she have been?" All right, but so there's a lot of buyer's remorse out there. How difficult it gets, but like I said, America is on the brink of social civil disorder. I really don't want more of that, and I'm, as I said, very concerned about those people who feel that Donald Trump betrayed him, who supported him, and whether or not they, in turn, take their extreme anger and direct it at him, and that this becomes really a problem internally. We don't need, the United States is best off being, straightforward, telling the truth, doing the things that we told other people to do. If we just did 60% of that, we would be a wonderful nation. It certainly is reflective. Our people in America are decent people. They're just pressed really hard. We talked about the middle class. I don't blame people for being angry. I'm angry as well, because I'm less angry than sad. Because the values and the people I know there they're decent people. No one has changed. It's just their circumstances have changed, and they're now making decisions based on survival as opposed to aspirational, and that's the sad part. So I'm hoping. I don't know what the Democrats are going to vote for. They haven't done a terrific job on that end. But I'm hoping that the times will make the person, the leader, and that we will get somebody who says, look, we have to look to our future. And our future isn't reindustrializing on low margin businesses that will be in competition with an existing manufacturing base and lead to a trade war, which is going to decimate profits. We need to start focusing on the digital future and how we can prepare our people, how we can rebuild our infrastructure, all right, how we can make ourselves competitive in the world, as opposed to trying to stop the tide because we say so.
Very, very interesting, Einar. I hope next time we talk, we're going to be talking about these digital aspects of it. So, because I am seeing some we don't have the infrastructure for what we want to do, or even compete with the likes of China. We don't have that infrastructure. We don't have the brain power for that.
Well, so, we used to, but now we're driving it away, which is kind of, it's really an issue, especially in the academic world, as you know. I know so many people who are coming back to Beijing. I said, "Oh, you're here for a visit?" No, I've switched. I've come back. I said, well, "Oh, really? Is it that bad?" They said, "No, I can't stay there." I says, "They love America. They loved living in America. They chose to go to America. All right. Now they feel they have no choice but to go back home."
Well, I made my decision, Einar. I will not teach here in the U.S. anymore. I'm done. I'm done with that. I can't thank you enough, my friend. I really can't thank you enough on behalf of the entire community. I look forward to having you again. We'll continue our conversation. So
all the best to you and all your listeners. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you for the nice plugs for Taihe and also for myself.
Of course. Of course.
All right. All the best.
Hey, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Einar is someone, if you want to learn the depth of thinking, first of all, and the facts, and as you know, guys, I just don't bring whomever to the channel here. You know where I stand on this stuff. So anyway, I wish you a safe and good weekend. Enjoy it, and I look forward to seeing you next week. As always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, guys. Bye.